Assalamu alaikum and good evening to everybody who has joined us today, either on our Facebook platform or through Zoom. So this is one of our outreach sessions. We are doing it after a pretty long period of time. We are very lucky to have with us today very cool guys, Zulkifl Hussain and Ishfaq. Both Zulkifl and Ishfaq are our coordinators, and they are volunteering for our outreach program, and they're also contributing to our newsletter also. So Zulkifl will be speaking today about different opportunities in the US and admissions and take us through her journey. Ishfaq will moderate the session. Zulkifl comes from, she is born and raised in Srinagar. She did her undergrad from National Institute of Technology at Srinagar and did a couple of internships in between and then moved to do her master's in Italy, if I'm not wrong, right? And
That's
then
right.
she went for a short period of time to do some research at Germany. And then she found a PhD program to work on something very cool, intersecting between physics and material sciences.
That's right.
She has been volunteering with JKS scientists since past couple of months. And she's contributing through outreach program, mentoring students, and also contributing to the newsletter team. We also have with us Dr. Ishfaq. Dr. Ishfaq is a very cool person and a very good friend of mine. He's born in, he's from Anantnag. He did his undergrad from Kashmir and moved to do his master's and PhD from Aligarh Muslim University, specializing in climate change. And he moved to University of Leeds to do his postdoctoral, studying different intersections of climate change and human interfaces. A lot of philosophy in between that Ishfaq is doing. He has been visiting a couple of places in a couple of countries to do research, including Norway and Canada also, but he's based in UK, Leeds. Ishfaq will be the moderator of this session and he will take us through this outreach session today. So once again, thank you, Zulkifl, and thank you, Ishfaq, for joining us today. So Ishfaq, the floor is all yours. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Khalid bhai. Hi, my name is Ishfaq. I'm a postdoc fellow at the University of Leeds. So today we have with us Zulkifl Hussain, who is a graduate student at the University of Toledo in USA. So in today's session, we will be talking about scholarship opportunities and admission processes in United States. So we'll have some interactions with Zulkifl, where she will guide us through some of her journey, some opportunities that students back home can avail, and what is the process of applying for those opportunities, how to get in different universities, and how to avail those different opportunities that people can avail from different backgrounds, from different disciplines, and how they can enter into different courses, whether it is masters or PhD or probably postdoc fellows as well. So Zulkifl, welcome to this outreach session from JK Scientists. So can you please tell us something about your background, where are you from, and about your schooling and your journey from Kashmir to USA?
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to see there are so many students who are interested in this, and it's really encouraging to see so many people who are potential researchers, future researchers to see here. Thanks a lot for having me. And so my upbringing has been totally done in Kashmir. I'm from Srinagar. I was born there. I was raised there. My schooling has been in Army Public School. If anybody here might know about that, it's a school in Badami Bagh Cantonment. I did my first 15 years of education in Army Public School, and after that, I went through the regular entrance examinations. I did my AIEEE and got admission in NIT. In NIT, I was in metallurgical and materials engineering. So I did my undergrad there, and after that, I decided I wanted to pursue. It was during my undergrad that I realized research was really something very interesting. I wasn't for sure very confident about what path I would want to take ahead in my after my bachelor's, but I knew I would want to do something in research. So I found a subject really very interesting during my undergrad, which was about nanotechnology and nanomaterials. That kind of piqued my interest. So I decided to pursue in material science. I applied for in between of my undergrad and masters, I did some internships. I did a research-based internship in Hyderabad. The institute is known as ARCI Hyderabad. It's in Telangana, and it's also about powder metallurgy and nanomaterials. So I ended up working there with some really amazing scientists who happened to be working in photovoltaics. Although back then I did not know I would be working in photovoltaics in future, but I did that internship, and in the meanwhile, I started applying in masters. Uh, all across Europe. I wanted to go to Europe for some personal reasons. I started applying, and I was lucky enough to get an institute in Italy, which is a really good place and has had really good QS rankings. And there I got into a master's program about which was about materials engineering again, materials engineering and nanotechnology, and it's broadly classified as one of the industrial engineering department in the engineering fields. I did my coursework there, but there was probably the opportunity was provided by the institute was very helpful, rather, where I could choose the place of my thesis. So I decided to again go ahead and look for some different place for my thesis to get more experience. I applied in, there are various institutes in Europe which offer students the opportunity of just conducting their thesis or an internship sort of a thing during their masters. So I did that, and I got an intern, I got a thesis position in Germany in the Freiburg Institute, and that also works on solar energy. So that was kind of an overlap between my masters and background in materials engineering, and they required someone who had a background in materials. So I started working in Freiburg for slightly more than a year, and during that period, I simultaneously started applying for PhD positions in US. Well, I did get a couple of during all of this time, I did get some periods where I got job opportunities, but then because I was oriented towards research, I never took up any industrial role. I always have been involved in research per se. I would for sure want to add this that, like my thesis and master's, I have also done a thesis in my bachelor's in materials department in NIT, but that was also a collaboration with physics department in Kashmir University. So my thesis has been, both the theses have been really very collaborative and very interesting, which kind of did lead me towards the place I'm in right now, physics and material science, and I'm conducting research in cadmium telluride based solar cells, basically, and I'm working on material science and the physics of it, if that kind of summarizes the whole journey.
Great, thanks. So, what inspired you and motivated you to pursue a career in science?
I remember it all happens right from your childhood. That's very true too. And my father has been really very inspiring all the time. He's a strong believer in science being very helpful for everything that you do for the world, in the world. So for sure, it has been always there in the family. But then when I went to school and I started learning about physics, I remember I was in my 10th grade and there was a teacher who was teaching us the definition of light. And that's when I got introduced to the concept of photons. So the way teachers have been very, very inspiring. I've been lucky enough to get teachers who inspired me enough because they kind of showed me the deeper and real meaning. And I guess they were themselves very, very great. That's why I understood things so much better with them. And when I started learning about physics, materials, and science in general, it was something that I would find myself zoned in, which probably many people will understand now. So I was really zoned in, something that really piqued my interest. I did enjoy learning about it. And of course, I had some family encouragement was always there. I had a cousin who was already doing her PhD, so that was inspiring. That really helped me. And mostly, I'm really grateful to have had come across very good teachers who did teach me physics and science in general really well.
Okay, so what is the best advice that somebody has ever given to you?
Best advice. I think over the years how things have gone by, I very much acknowledge the fact that it's hard to get really what you like to get into a place where you do absolutely what you want to do, and you're happy all the time about it. It's really hard to do that. But then I think the closest we can do is, this is what I've learned all this time. The closest we can do is just try to find a place where our likings, even if not 100%, they kind of overlap with what has been provided to us. It and this is for I realize there are many undergrads here, many master students here who maybe, I hope many of them are in the right place, but maybe some of them are not, and they're trying to figure out. It's absolutely fine. It took me a while to figure out what I really wanted. It wasn't like I was in my undergrad or in my high school and I knew absolutely, okay, this is the thing I wanted to do. It took me some time. I learned about various subjects. I went to different classes, different places, and it was through navigating through a lot of stuff that finally I found something, especially during my master's. I found there were these two subjects where I was completely lost, that and I totally and deeply just cared about those two things. So even if you're not there, even if you haven't figured out what you really want, it's fine. Just go through the grit for a while, and have faith that eventually you will figure it out. And even if it takes a little bit time, it's totally worth it. So go ahead, navigate around, and you will eventually reach a place where you will find some alignment between what you want and what the whole system has to offer to you. I think that one professor from NIT Srinagar, he's called S.A. Shah. He goes by S.A. Shah. He has been really very encouraging throughout. And he taught me this thing in my undergrad, which I will completely remember forever. And that was, even sky is not your limit. Do whatever you want, try all your hands and feet, and do whatever it takes for you to get where you want. I think that has been one thing which I will never forget from my professor.
Okay, great. Were there any specific challenges or obstacles that you faced in your career? And if there were some, how did you overcome these?
Oh, there was one actually, there which has always been my motive. So it's kind of also family, that we do not, like my father especially, he doesn't believe in um, a kind of education where you have to be funded all the time. So I didn't enjoy that privilege. So I had to, and then of course, when it's inbuilt, you kind of live with that all the time. So I had made it a point that even if I would go out, I would want to self-finance myself. So I had cut out the options of loan, or taking money. So that was one challenge that I really had to. I did come across a lot of problems around that. I did get scholarships during my master's, and that also was one of the rather defining parameters of where I would land in my master's, if I had sufficient funding during my master's. But it turned out that in Italy, in this amazing university of Politecnico Milano, there were a lot of opportunities actually, and there was one scholarship which was granted by, which was, I think it was some common thing between the governments of Italy and India, and they were giving scholarships for material science background somehow. So somehow I dug into a lot of, like, thousands of websites, and I found this place, and that was one thing that was a great challenge I had to come across. Finding scholarship in masters was not as easy, but eventually that was done. I did live through some period where I had absolutely no support, and I had to navigate through a lot, but then it got figured out. I eventually did find a place that was paying well enough. I think also, it was, to be honest, it was a little bit of struggle to find my master thesis something that I really like doing. Because you do get opportunities, but sometimes they're not exactly what you want, and your thesis can be really very defining for what you do in future. So for example, if you're in your bachelor's and you have your thesis done in physics, it'll be defining, especially for your research in, if you decide to not go for conventional masters, just apply in some research groups, it will be defining. Similarly for masters. So that was a bit of a challenge. I had to navigate around which place would be of benefit for me. uh, I think those two were probably some challenges which I did really have to spend a lot of energy and resources navigating around. Finances for sure, but it did happen. It did pay itself. The system paid for itself, and for sure, finding the place which I really thought would be helpful in future.
You mentioned about the importance of thesis. So
Right.
can you tell us a little bit more about that and how important it is and how does it kind of you know is important in trajectory of a future of a student and also about your own thesis, what your research is all about.
Right. So, like thesis and masters is especially important for people who decide to go for research in future. If you're deciding to go for industry, I don't think it's as big of a deal. It has to be relevant for sure because in industry you end up learning during your internship period with the companies. You end up learning everything about them. Uh, but for research per se, it's very defining because you just get these specific number of months where you're getting trained in a research lab. You learn various kind of equipments. You learn a lot of techniques of how to deal in the, if you're especially in an experimentation section of the science. I think similar goes for theory. You end up learning about some softwares. You end up learning about the numerical skills. You need to go ahead with that. So if you're doing your masters, or even if I know of some people who directly apply after their bachelor's or are in research, if you're in that period where you want to apply for further PhD positions and you're currently doing some kind of research, it has to be very relative to what you want to do in your PhD because especially if you want to apply in US, which is what I've learned, the way PhD students work here is kind of more like an employment thing. It's not just a student kind of work you do here. You're employed for 5 days a week. You get paid according to the employment status. So you are not just a student here anymore. They are also looking forward to a potential employee. So for that, you want to be relevant. If you, for example, if you have something that you like right now and you think you won't continue, you may want to continue your research in that, you might as well start thinking from right now how you want to build up your current thesis, which aligns with that. Even if it's not 100%, but it should be around, even if 50%, 60%, it should align with it so that you have some commonality to build up on. Even if you have to learn some softwares or if it's about laboratory skills, you want to keep it similar. If it's about material science, or I think it's it's independent of which field you're pursuing for. It really having your background in something very similar boosts up the employers per se, and it gives them some confidence, some level of confidence that you're not just a student who's going to depend on them, but you're also kind of an investment. PhD here in US is kind of business-like. It's not as there is an element of business in it. It's not just student and mentor or student and an advisor thing. You are kind of an employer, so you have to give into it. So and that'll only happen if you've learned about that, something about that in your past. So keeping your thesis aligned with what you want in your future seems like a really good idea, which has helped me in the past, and I would definitely recommend that for all the students there. I think most of them are, it seems like, or are in their undergrad or masters. So that would be something really important to consider right now. So I kind of hopped during my thesis. When I was in my masters, I did a thesis which was based on rheology, which is the study of fluids, the viscosity of fluids. But I was doing that because I wanted to apply all that rheological study to the fabrication of solar cells. I wasn't directly involved in solar technology at the Freiburg Institute in Germany, but I was working on the material science part of something that would be relevant to solar technology. And then I realized that there's a very nice opportunity for physics. I really wanted to get into physics, so I realized because I'm already doing material science, which is closely related to condensed matter physics, so I could make a hop. So my master thesis was, although material science, but it was for sure being used for solar technology. It was being used for photovoltaics. So I applied in this place here at Toledo, and they are doing. It's in the physics department, but we are conducting all materials physics. It's again on photovoltaics. So that gave me a. So I hopped from material science only into physics but like the broad spectrum of which I'm working, the broader umbrella is the same. I'm working on photovoltaics. Right now, what I'm working on, if there are any for material science students in this group, it's, if you want a generalized term, it would rather be a synthesis and fabrication. But then I am for sure going way deeper than that. I have been given a very huge piece of equipment in which I'm able to fabricate some single crystal, some polycrystalline solar cells. Uh, they are mostly based on cadmium telluride material, which is a thin film solar cell, which you can get on your windows or all the glass that you have in this world. I work on that, and then I go on and test the material and realize a lot of properties that the material has to offer. So it's kind of a feedback loop where you fabricate, you do some testing, and then you realize how it's going to be, and then you change your crack course. So it has been my thesis in the past, have been defining of what I've gotten until today. My bachelor thesis has been helpful in getting me master's position, which has been relevant. Then again, my master's thesis has been very defining in getting what I want for my PhD. Now, of course, after you apply for PhD, it's again, if you want to go into industry, it can be rather general, but if you want to stick to research, your postdoc, or if you want to if you want to work as a scientist, it will be for sure defined by it will be very much defined by what you've done in your PhD. So the higher you go, it kind of becomes more defining what you've done in your thesis and whatever small projects you have. So that's what I do right now in my PhD. I am working on cadmium telluride based solar cells, thin film solar cells. I fabricate solar cells, I fabricate single crystal and polycrystalline solar cells. And then we're working with some collaborators where we send them for fabrication, for characterizations, and we do some testing on our end as well.
Great. You mentioned that during your PhD in the US, you're not just a student, but also a potential employee. And so, what do you think are the essential skills or kind of qualities that are needed during your PhD, or how you have to tailor yourself as per those requirements?
There are some very important considerations, especially for students coming from a non-Western background or who have not had enough exposure to non or to Western education system. The first of all, the philosophy of how people deal with students here is completely different from how we have been, from how I was brought up in, or how I learned in. When it becomes business-like, what I mean is that the person who's hiring you for, let's say, who's giving you an admission for PhD, here PhD is for 5 years, like on paper it's for 5 years, for sure it can go up to 6 years, but that also includes your master's. So if there's an analogy to draw, I would use the integrated PhD term that usually IITs do provide, where you have master's plus PhD. So the PhD here in US is everywhere. It's just that the grad school is that it's your master's plus your PhD, which ends up becoming a 5 year program, or 6 year, depending on how your research goes. During those 6 years, in more than 80% of the universities, and if you're applying for, most of the time people do apply for positions which are funded, you will be paid every month of the year. So you are treated as an employee. You get 15 days vacations like any other employee does. You have some healthcare that is provided to you. So it's the university, your professors, they are investing in you. They're providing you with all the resources like an employee deserves. When you get that, it kind of shifts from just being a student. You're no more a student, you're working and you're getting paid for that. And I mean, I think it goes in general when you apply for any position anywhere in the world. If you are a potential employee there, you want to be an asset to that position. You want to show that you're ready to put up with some problems as well. You want to show that you want to rather have that instinct of solving a problem. You want to have that instinct of uh, not getting bogged down or overwhelmed by the problems that are there. You want to have a spirit of taking over the problems, proving that you can rather solve problems, you can fix stuff, even if it be as small as fixing a transformer at times, which is relevant to my research. Even if it's a thing that's really very small, but you have something that you offer to them. You have learned enough stuff, you have learned enough skills, you have enough knowledge that you can provide. that is a huge thing that benefits the employer as well as the employee. That will benefit your research group in future and your research as well. So that's something that's really very important to keep in mind. I do realize that during your undergrad and your masters, you're just going through classes, you just learn about subjects, which is very theoretical. But this is why I say your thesis, your lab time, or your research time is really very defining. That those are the only few months where you really get to learn about how whatever you've theoretically learned so far really gets applied in real world. So spend as much time you get working beyond your classes. For sure, learn all the theory. Theory is, you have to have solid theoretical foundation, but you definitely want to learn skills. If you are in experimentation, you want to learn all the laboratory skills, depending on what you're applying. If you're a chemist, you want to learn everything about chemistry in lab. If you're a material scientist, you want to get a little hands on with all the materials, with all the instruments that are around there. You want to learn about, and not just about how they work, but you may also want to go ahead and learn about, what if it fails, will I be able to fix it? Because that's one thing really very different in US, that you don't have as many technicians here. Like in all the laboratories in India especially, students just go perform a test, and if something's broken, there's always a technician who comes and fixes it. There's no technician here in US. PhD students are the technicians. PhD students are, they have, like, the lab entirely belongs to a PhD student, which is a huge benefit, which helps you learn tremendously. But it also means that you have to fix everything once it's broken. You have to clean your labs once you're done. You have to do everything. It's like housekeeping. The lab belongs to you, but you have to take care of every single thing. Now, if you've already learned about those things, it's different if you are a newcomer and you have to deal with some instruments that have particular power requirements, and you have absolutely had no experience in the past. Sometimes you have to drill holes, use heavy machining equipment. Sometimes you have to file things, chip and saw stuff. If someone who's already had that background and is confident, and you can just straight away go and say, I have already learned it. I'm fully capable of fixing this problem. So that's a huge benefit a student can have. Mm, that is where the business aspect of this doing PhD in US comes from. But that also, you have to put up with some grit. You have to have grit to put up with all the problems that you come across. But it's a tremendous learning experience. Things fail all the time in labs. You have to fix all the broken equipments, but it's tremendous learning experience for you, and you end up learning so much about even the minute details that are there. So that is where the business aspect would come into play. It is good for a student who's applying, but you definitely want to know some stuff before you join any lab to be a benefit to the lab.
Great. You mentioned that a lot of students are focusing on theoretical aspect only, but there's a lack of, that technical expertise or that of kind of experimental expertise that people have. Like back
Right.
home, we have seen like a lot of students just, just remembering things, getting into theory, even in subjects where you have actual lab work, which is lacking for the students. And a lot of times, like people just copy paste, like somebody's file, they just copy it and make their own file without actually
Absolutely.
without actually having their own experience. So, what advice do you have students, like how, actually going to the lab, learning all those things, and how that could be helpful not during their courses, whether it is masters or bachelors, but also in the future?
There's one thing that's called, and I totally believe that it helps. There's one thing known as attitude inversion. So you invert your attitude, and you just don't focus on it being something that will help in your employment. If you really like doing what you are, if you really want to be in science, if you really want to pursue science as a research, you have to invert your attitude. You have to rather start believing that it's something that's going to be of immense meaning to your own life. And once you do that, I think that is one really turning point in your heads. Once you invert your attitude and you internalize deeply that whatever my research is going to be, it's not just going to be a product that will help a research group. It's not just going to be an output that's going to give me potential employment, but it's going to be something that will be meaningful to my life, because I will be able to solve some existing problems in the world that will help you get a completely different aspect on what you are learning right now. That is where your hands-on idea comes into play. uh, I have most of my undergrad and masters has also been just learning about courses. For sure, that's a fundamental requirement, because courses, you don't have any other way to learn at least the basics. You have to do that. But then, for example, in my case, if I'm a material science student, if I want to be a materials physicist someday, if I start believing that I am only doing this to get a job, I will learn it, but there will be some deficiency. But if I am sure that I want to be a researcher somehow and I want to be meaningful, there's every little aspect of what I do, I want to learn about it. For example, I'll give you an example which is something that happened to me. So maybe people here will relate to that. We were doing some experiments in my undergrad, which was about fabricating some oxides, fabricating ferrites for and checking their magnetic properties and stuff. I I don't think back then I had internalized completely all this thought of these things being meaningful in my research. So it was just about me doing a bunch of steps. I was given a set of instructions, I think, which is very, very common there. It's maybe many of the students here might be going through it. You will be given a set of instructions. You will have to follow that, and your job is done. When you come out of it, you realize there was really exponentially huge amount of thing I could have learned from it. For example, I was doing some, but I do also understand that there are some systemic limitations that we have there. For example, I know that as an undergrad, you will not be allowed to use personally a very sensitive instrument. For example, we had FESEM, we had some really good XRD devices. I knew that I wasn't allowed there. For sure, those limitations are there, but then look for the broken things. Look for the things that are already broken in the department, some machinery that is defunct. Try and fix it. That's where your experimental knowledge will build up. Try and fix whatever is broken in the workshop. Go ahead, fiddle with it. Use whatever your common sense is. So broken stuff, really, which qualifies as laboratory garbage, is helpful there. That is where you can use your skills. That is where you can develop your skills. Go and fix some broken equipment in your lab, and you will see a direct link between what you've learned. And you've learned science, you will get to see how that science works. uh, I do understand, but you will be limited in what you can do in labs. So finding out ways of how you can interact with the real world, which being your laboratory in this case, how you can interact with your real world and apply the theoretical skills. That would be really very that is very interesting, and it rather helps you shape up. It helps you decide better if you want to be a researcher in life. If you haven't ever dealt with, if you have not had a hands-on experience, if you haven't ever fixed a broken system, you won't really know deep that if you want to pursue with that in your lifetime or not. That also helps you be more decisive. Go ahead and do it. If you don't want to do it, if you don't want to do any of the hands-on stuff, especially if you're an experimental, that will also be an indication if you want to continue doing research or not. Theory is good, theory is fine, but applying that in your lab and learning from that is rather very helpful, I'd say.
Yeah. You mentioned about the importance of interdisciplinary research. How important is that specifically back home when we have kind of rigidity? If you are pursuing, MSc in chemistry, you have to focus only on that discipline, or whether it
Right.
is physics or so. How important is this interdisciplinary research, going forward?
Here in US, you realize once you enter research, things get really very interdisciplinary, which makes sense, of course, too. If you're doing material science, there's a huge element of physics that's associated with it. That's collaborative work helps really in that. Um, Back home, of course, it's a limitation because I think when I did my undergrad thesis, I could do it. I worked in University of Kashmir Physics Department, so I did some collaborative work. But for sure, establishing collaboration is something that doesn't only help you learn about interdisciplinary fields, but it helps you build up as a researcher because you realize this when you become a researcher, you realize there's not just one single thing that you do. If you are I'll speak about myself. If I'm a materials physicist, I don't only learn about physics. I have to learn a lot of chemistry. I have to learn good amount of math too for that. So looking for, but I know maybe there are some groups in IITs per se, IITs, IISCs, which are very collaborative in their nature. If you are lucky enough to find a position like that, that would be really great, especially if you're in a place where you want to hop your positions, you're not sure you want to stay in the same field where you have been for long. Looking for groups that are collaborative does really help. They are limited for sure in Kashmir, but maybe not as much in IITs because in IIT Delhi, I remember there's electrical department which takes students from material science because they're doing something in electrical, something similar in IICs. You may have to go out of your comfort zone for sure. May not have to stick completely in Kashmir, but it's definitely something that'll help you spring across the field if you want to do that, if that's something you want to do.
Can you list some important funding opportunities or scholarship opportunity for students, whether it is masters or bachelor's or PhD? Name like kind of some name of some fundings or scholarships where people can apply, and what is the process of going through that, process of applying and then getting the admission or getting the fellowship?
Uh, Digging up the websites, usually most of the European universities, when I was looking for European master's positions, websites have almost everything that you need. So digging up all the university websites is the first go-to. You should definitely do that. How That's how I found my master's scholarship. There are various platforms. There's one scholarshipportal.com, then there's mastersportal.com. Those online platforms help you dig out a lot many scholarships across US. I think you could filter out the countries that you want to go into, and it shows whatever possible scholarship opportunities are there in those countries. I use those websites a lot. There is an Erasmus program that goes across Europe. That is also, it's filled with scholarship opportunities in Europe. Erasmus program, they have a lot of materials. I think it spans across all the science. It's interdisciplinary. In Europe, you can do that. However, in spite of all these opportunities, there are some countries which which are not accustomed to providing a lot of scholarships. I think Germany is one such country. Germany doesn't have a lot of scholarship just for masters, but then there are ways to navigate around it. Uh, Other than scholarship, like where you're getting completely paid as a school student, there are ways in which I came across in Germany. You can work in some research group while you're doing your masters or while you're conducting your studies. And those collaborative research institutes, Max Planck is one of them. Freiburg for sure is. Fraunhofer is also one of them. Max Planck does that. There are various research labs which are across Europe who are ready to fund students just during their masters. So even if you don't have a master's, that's another opportunity that you can really use in your, especially if you want to go to Europe. That's something you can use. In PhD, most of the positions in Europe are funded. Some come through government funds. Some have university fundings, but that will depend upon again the country that you're applying to. In some countries like in Italy, you have right to education, so every student has a right to education, but in and you will be supported by government in some cases. So there are some financial aid options. There are some scholarships as well for that. If you belong to a certain income class, for example, and you prove it to them, then there is a financial aid option that the government of Italy provides you. That has, I think, helped a lot many students in Italy. There are many Kashmiri students in Italy right now who have used that financial aid option, and it has been very helpful. There are I believe in Chalmers University in Sweden, again, there are many scholarship opportunities. But I believe when it comes to Europe, you have to be very country specific. Not all the countries provide it. You have to dig in deep on the websites of these of the universities that you want to apply. In PhD in US, there are main two ways of getting funded. One is if your research group has enough money, if your professors have a lot of money, because the funding here in US is different. Like if I have my research group, the funding can come from literally any place. It can come from a private organization, it can come from Department of Energy, or it can also come from any other bigger lab that there is, or a national lab there is. So you want to make sure your lab has enough money. If you want to be flexible, if you want to have some flexibility in your research, that helps. So if your lab has enough money, then you most probably will be hired as a research assistant. So you will be funded. In US, I don't think there are, most of the PhD positions are like completely funded throughout. So you may, one way is you will get hired as a research assistant. So you will work your 4 or 5 years as a research assistant and get paid. The other way is if your lab is not that rich, if it's relying on university payroll continuously, you will be hired as a teaching assistant, wherein you will be expected to put in some hours monthly, weekly, into probably teaching some undergrads, or kind of help in the teaching system of the university. So those are two main routes here in US. Either you'll be hired as a research assistant or a teaching assistant.
Are there any specific websites that people can search or specific, fellowship opportunity like we have Commonwealth or Sharing or some other fellowships? Are there any specific and websites on specific fellowships that people can apply and people can visit?
Scholarshipsportal.com is for sure something that helps. I think if you're applying for mastersportal.com is also something that helps a lot. If you're applying for PhD positions here nowadays, because of AI, things have become really very easy. If you just want to write in ChatGPT, it'll give you a bunch of universities that you can apply to. But then again, here in US, I don't know if there's a common platform, but because research groups tend to be very specific, so you may want to go rather in the university website itself. In US, I have found the university websites to be the most helpful rather than overusing any common platform, which is something that was of real help in Europe. So things are a little different here in US. You will have to dig it through the university websites, and it happens that 100% of the times I have come across it, the university website will always be filled with the information that you're looking for. And there are so many, I mean, you could just, if you just want to start with the state level universities, there are 50 states. So each state has a state level university. Just pick a name and start with it. And from one university, you will get 1,000 links where people are working collaboratively, and you can look up for different universities. For PhD in US, I would definitely, like, the top of the list is just going for university websites. For sure, you can always use, I wouldn't recommend common platforms for PhD positions in US especially.
Which scholarship did you get, and how can somebody get a similar scholarship?
In my master's, I got this scholarship. It was by MHRD, Ministry of India and Italy. It was for material science background though, so that's how I got it. But there, uh, again, I found it only from the university website. I didn't find that scholarship from any common portal, which is why I always highly recommend only using the university websites. However, I did get one Erasmus scholarship. For a while I was on the waiting list, but then I ended up getting it. So Erasmus again is a very great platform which you can use for scholarships and stuff. Then in PhD again, PhD was like regular employment. It's a stipend where you get paid on a bi-weekly basis, which happens in most of the universities here. I think the most challenging part was to find a scholarship in masters rather than a scholarship in PhD. PhD is usually by default it's funded. More challenging is to find it in master, and I don't think in US you have any scholarship for masters. It's really very hard to find in US. So which is why if there are students right now who are in their undergrad and who want to do PhD, it's rather a beneficial thing for them to get done with your undergrad, go in some lab, find a lab in, if there's a good lab in Department of Physics in Kashmir, go and do that. That's very specific though. But find some good labs in India or in your neighborhood, in neighborhood states. Find some good labs, get some laboratory skill, and directly apply for PhD program in US, because you're eligible for PhD in US. You're directly eligible after your bachelor's, but you just need to accumulate maybe 1 or 2 years of laboratory skill or experimentation or whatever outside of classroom skills you want. So I think that's I know of many students who have directly gotten into PhD admission in US after their bachelor's. It's just that they have spent 1 or 2 years in labs and in research groups learning about it. So I think that's PhD in US that way is easier.
We have some questions in the chat, so we can
For
have
sure.
these questions. Then we have some questions from participants that we can have after this. So one question is, how important are internships to a career in STEM? What would you advise undergrads and master's students in terms of seeking internships or project position at different institutions, like you did an internship at Telangana?
The internship I did in Telangana was it was something that I read on a notice board in NIT Srinagar. One of the professors had put it. It was again because of collaborations. There was a professor at NIT who was collaborating externally with some professors somewhere in Telangana, and I got on that internship. I think for most of the research internships that you are eligible for as an undergrad student, your grades are very important, because up until you join some internship in your undergrad, you have had no out of your classroom experience. So you have to pull up your grades a little bit. Your grades become important in that. So because research groups, they tend to take only the top 10%, maybe top 5% students. So if you want to get into an internship like in a research group, keep up your grades, know in detail about your subjects. Just don't know the fact, know how your subjects relate to real life, how the concepts relate. And keeping your grades high is like a must in getting an internship in research group. But getting an internship in industry gets a little different. If you want to get an internship in a company, there's a lot of networking that happens. I realize there are some mock United Nations groups that are currently running in NIT Srinagar. There are various social groups that are operational on ground in NIT, in Kashmir University, various universities, Islamic University. You want to use those skills if you want to get into industry. If you want to get a job after undergrad, those are the links you use. Networking is really extremely important in your undergrad if you want to get into some particular internship. uh, I got my After my undergrad, I got a campus placement position. I think that was Vedanta Steels. That happened completely through campus recruitments. So again, you have to have networks if you want to get into industry. But for research groups, I would say look for collaborations. Your professor will definitely know some other professor in some state who will have some kind of opportunity available. Talk a lot to your professors. See if they have collaborations. I recently some students connected with me from NIT, and they have some really good professors from NIT Varangal, from IITs, who have some. So once you start expanding your area of work, you come to know about more and more people who are working in research groups, research labs, and that's also a really great way of getting internship in a research group. There are a lot of people from Kashmir who are working everywhere in India, everywhere in the world. Especially in India, as an intern, you can for sure use all the contacts. So keep your grades high, use all the contacts that you have.
Okay, we have a lot of questions. Can you give us some brief information about these questions? Like one question is, while you are part of JK Scientists team, what suggestions do you have for the students in the context of our flagship programs such as mentorship and outreach?
Uh, I would say the only good thing that I have in my head is, if you know of something, spread the word out. If you know of one scholarship opportunity, spread it out to as many students as you can, and convey the word irrespective of where the person is coming from. Just keep in mind that you want to expand the opportunities. You come across 5 into 5 scholarship positions, pass it on to 10, 15 students, as many as you can. That I think is the spirit of outreach program to help as many as you can, irrespective of their backgrounds.
Okay, so there's a question from Zahir. I have some 1 year experience in material science, but don't have master thesis. What to do?
Can you, sorry, repeat that again?
I have 1 year experience in material science, but
Mhm.
don't have a master's thesis. So what to do?
Well, if you can consolidate that year of experience, that will count itself. That you just have to have a brief synopsis will also be fine. So, but for sure, look for the institutes that you're applying for if they have a requirement. Sometimes some institutes do ask for very technical format too. Some research groups are fluid. If you have some future research group in mind, go and check their eligibility criteria if they need that. There are many groups in US. I know there are many groups which are fluid to this concept. They just want to know if you know about stuff. So even if you have a year, you can for sure consolidate it, write a synopsis out of it, and that can work. That should be something that can replace your technical thesis.
Another question is how to shortlist universities for PhD in foreign universities. How to
Well,
yeah.
PhD is a longer program. It's intense, way more intense than any of your undergrad or bachelor's would be. So definitely, first of all, look for things that you absolutely like doing, because you'll have to end up spending a lot of time in PhD. So don't look for stuff which you just find yourself being busy in just because you need something for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. Look for things that you have some inclination towards. That's, I think, the first and the most important thing you want to do. The second would be you want to be in a place where there's good funding. Research becomes extremely easy when the resources are enough. When your research group, if your research group has enough resources, you can spend on, this applies especially to experimental people. You can spend on whatever resources you want in lab, be it as small as beakers or getting a big equipment. For theory as well, that would be, I think, the second most important thing. Look for good funding. If there's good funding, your research is going to be easier. It'll be less stressful. The third thing would be to talk to the to PhD current PhD students and learn about the research work environment they're in. Because I know there are some groups which can get some places which can get really tough for students. The environment is not good. So get in touch with the current PhD students and learn from them if you can.
So what are the eligibilities that one should have in hand which matter for PhD in US or Europe? And does master's thesis really matter or experience matters having already other documents like degree or CV?
In US, you can apply for PhD directly after your bachelor's, because US PhD has a master's inbuilt. So US PhD is like a master's plus PhD. So you are eligible right after your undergrad. But that doesn't mean you will get into. Your undergrad has to be really very good. And a sure short way is after that undergrad, um, you equip yourself with some years, maybe a year. I think 1 year is also enough. After your undergrad, you want to do a year of work outside of your classroom. That helps in US programs. Having said that, there are many students who do a conventional bachelor's, master's, like myself, and then come here. That's equally acceptable, but I believe that's just a little bit of spending up your time in ways where you could save it. In US, but in Europe, they have a 3 year PhD program, and you have to have a master's. So masters can be from any other place. So those are two different things. If you want to come to US, go and find some work for a year and a half, maybe in India, in some good lab, use those skills and directly apply for PhD. I would highly suggest that.
Another question, how to email professors and can you give some important tips for that?
Yes, that's something we can definitely, all of us can learn from. Do not send very lengthy emails. Keep your emails as crisp and as short as you can. Summarize everything in your email. Uh, Professors go by name here, so don't worry about being overly respectful. Be very confident, sound confident in your email text when you're writing them. Always have your CV, your resume, and your SOP attached to an email if you are writing to any professor. Um, if you want them to hire you, just bullet down that you have done this so far, you have this experience, and find a link of what you have learned so far and what they are doing. So that will kind of give them a boost of that they will be hiring somebody who already knows about what they're doing. Establish that common link you want with the professor. That really helps. But keep the email short. Don't send 200 worded emails. Professors get millions of emails a day. If it's too boring, they will not read it. So keep it short and crisp, and send your CV and resume and SOP attached with it all the time.
Okay. We have some questions from participants who are registered. So one question is, what are the best opportunities for women in tech field in US?
Best opportunity would really be defined by what you want to do ahead. So if you want to be a scientist, there are all the opportunities here in research, academia, in industry. For sure, academia is way more demanding than industry can be. There are 1,000 times more opportunities in industry. So if you want to be something in tech, there are millions of things you can do here. The thing is that I don't think me being a woman has ever stopped me from pursuing STEM. Things have changed now for sure. There are not any restrictions. The world has liberated from that idea of women not being enough. But I don't think that is a limitation at all. You want to do tech, just be good at what you do. Learn as much as you do. Go outside your comfort zone a little bit. It shouldn't be a problem. There are millions of opportunities in industry and in academia as well.
What is the ideal time to start applying for scholarships for the fall or spring intakes?
I know for sure there in Europe there are specific deadlines that you will have to look up to at the organization or the funding organization you're applying to. In US, most of the universities have their application periods open from September, and it goes until January, end of December. The earlier the better. But some universities, I remember, most of the universities have in this period from September to December. But some universities extended. I remember my university, University of Toledo, accepts through January. There are University of Michigan has a year-round. They have rolling applications. So some universities have rolling applications as well, which again you want to confirm from the university website. So September to December is the ideal time for your applications for PhD in US. There are some applications, but like for spring semester, those get very specific. 90% of the universities take in fall, so you might want to keep September to December.
Okay, there's another question. I would like to know the best possible scholarships in US.
The best possible scholarships are again, there are just I'm repeating it. There are just two ways of how you will get funded. Either it's through being a research assistant, or it is through being a teaching assistant, and both of those things will be funded by your research group or your university.
Okay, can we get admission in US without doing TOEFL or GRE?
Yes, there are many universities which have waived those requirements. So, although this is really very specific to university, I think University of Toledo has. So yeah, for sure you can. You just need to look up the university eligibility criteria. It gets a little hectic. You have to sometimes contact individual universities, but yes, there are opportunities if you want to do that.
Okay, so there is one question that we can have for broader audience that actually I'm working on perovskite materials oxides presently and is looking for a PhD research student visiting
Wait,
program. Huh?
that's actually very relevant to my field of work. Go ahead.
Yeah, so and is looking for a PhD research student visiting program outside country. Is there any way to get the same? Please, can you advise for that?
For sure, there is many people. I know of a couple of students who have applied as visiting researchers. They may not be completely funded here in US, but they kind of get accustomed to the lab. There's one professor at my university, Professor Yan Fayan. He works on perovskite solar cells, and they do really very amazing work. They do take students as visiting researchers, but they are all the year hiring students because this happens to be a place where professors can independently hire you as research assistants. So you should for sure directly write to the professors if you want that. You can ask them that you can work as a visiting researcher, or if they have positions open, for sure. Contact the professors directly in that case. I think there are some great opportunities in my university as well for that, especially for perovskite if you're asking about that.
Do you have any suggestions for researchers who already have enough experience in India, but post PhD, but still want to have foreign experience?
Most of the people who have done their PhD come here as postdocs. Uh, Postdoc is kind of an easy way to get into industry, especially if you want to do that. You apply here as a postdoc, maybe stay here for 1 year or two, and then you can get into industry. I'm not sure if the person is asking about research, but for industry, for sure, postdoc is an easy way. That also helps the industry hire you easily.
Okay, would you mind explaining short-term internship opportunities available abroad for bachelor students?
Yes, there are many companies for bachelor students.
Yeah.
Visa requirement is a hurdle, to be very honest, because you can rather have a traveling visa or a visiting visa, and then you can just ask for some trips. That is one way many students have worked their way. So it's kind of you have to navigate around it. But if you're just having a bachelor's, having an internship internationally, it either has to be through a government organization, something like Erasmus. It really helps in that. Find some positions through United Nations. They have a lot of opportunities. This is for STEM and non-STEM. United Nations have a lot of branches that work like that. Erasmus is for sure very helping. But if you cannot, I believe if you just have a travel visa, you can afford traveling, go there, just independently write to companies that I want to visit your place. And if there are some internship opportunities, I already have a visa. So kind of simplifying it for them, that way also helps at times.
And there is question, how did you avail scholarship in US and how CGPA affects in scholarship process?
CGPA does affect, especially if you're getting hired directly by your professor. CGPA and your background work. In my case, because I was working in Freiburg Institute in Germany, I directly applied through the PhD portal for my university, and one of the professors directly hired me. So I got hired as a research assistant directly from one of the professors and not as a teaching assistant like conventionally university hires. So that is how I did it. I just filled in my form through the university portal, and in a couple of days, a professor emailed me back and said he wanted to hire me. So that is also a very regular way of how you get hired here.
What is the ideal time frame during masters to start applying for PhD positions? And what are the chances of selection for those with limited prior research experience in the specific field?
6 months before your master thesis ends. If you do not want to give it a break, I think give it 6 months. 6 months is enough time for you to go through a lot many universities. For example, if I mean it goes with the semester system. If you want to start in fall, please start in or rather start in the fall before, so give yourself more than 6 months. 6 months should be the minimum. For someone who hasn't had enough lab experience, it would be beneficial for you to look up groups which are bigger, which have bigger fundings, because they may not, if you look for a smaller group, they may be looking for more expertise. If you look for a bigger group where there's a window of you not being as skilled, that will be an easier place to fit into. Look for bigger group with higher fundings.
What are some common mistakes students make while applying for scholarships? And what advice do you have for someone that is just starting their journey for applying in abroad?
The common mistakes is that we tend not to be imprecision in your writing. You tend to be either over wordy. These things get lost in very, very unnecessary details sometimes. Maybe somebody doesn't have enough skill of framing an email well. Even if your CV is good, even if your SOP is good, your email is too wordy, your professor will be bored before he reaches the end of the email and he will reject you therein. So be very, very precise in your language, be to the point and confident. Do not be overly polite. That is, I think, one very big thing all the students should always keep in mind. That is one common mistake. The other is how you frame your SOPs. SOPs are extremely important. SOPs are just one page that represent you. So you are not going to speak for yourself when you apply anywhere. It's your SOP that's going to speak for yourself. Again, keep that very concise. Even if it's just one page or 1.5 page long, keep it concise, briefly mention about your interests and relate them to whatever you're going for. SOP, and please be precise in your language in emails. That's something we can all benefit from.
Are conference papers enough for PhD admission in international universities?
Any publication counts for that matter. From what I have learned here in US, people, all the research groups, science doesn't work all the time. So even if you don't have a great publication, but there's something to support that you have done enough work, that is also helpful. If you have a conference paper, it's more than welcome. Whatever you have, bring it on board. Everything will be helpful, even if it's a great publication or not.
Yeah. So we have one question in chat. What could we add that our application can be considered, or is it advantageous for others? Some don'ts and do's that we must avoid or take while applying.
I think I did cover that in a few questions before about the language that you have. If you have your CV should be very easy to read. Make your CV easily readable. Make it precise. Do not add unnecessary details in your CV. Your SOP and CV should align well. So that is something you should also keep in mind.
I am currently pursuing masters. Should we prefer Europe or US for PhD?
You're currently pursuing masters. It again depends. So PhD in US, if you're doing your master's, is going to be lengthier than your PhD in Europe. If you want to do that, please go ahead. But even if it's lengthier, it's going to be a bigger learning experience. PhD in Europe is going to be shorter. You're going to be done in 2 or 3 years, but you may not end up learning as much. That's from my experience so far, because things get really very hands-on, especially in PhD here in US. And it also depends on where do you want to stay after your PhD. If you think you want to stay completely in Europe, then for sure do that. But if you think you want to come to US after that, getting into US industry or academia after you've had a PhD from somewhere outside of US is not very easy. If you want to stay here in US, if you think the work here in US is better, do apply for PhD in US, even if it seems longer.
Somebody is asking, I'm from a biochemistry background in my final year of bachelor's and nearly having a year of experience like internships in different NITs and in Kashmir University. What is the possibility of getting a PhD directly after my bachelor's? And kindly specify the different websites where I can apply.
One, if you're again talk to your professors. If your professor knows some other professor or if they're collaborating, that would be your easiest way to get a good position. Number two, yes, of course you're eligible. If you've already had more than a year of experience, you're more than eligible. Do start sending cold emails to professors. That will really be helpful. About a platform, again, research tends to be group specific. So there is not a common platform for digging out research about a group, what you can do. But if you sometimes it can be as easy as going on to LinkedIn and typing giving your keywords. But if there's something in particular, Google is also for help. But talk to your professors first. Your 1 year experience should count for more than that.
Another question is, if our interested areas for PhD doesn't match the work we did in past, can we change the area in subjects?
You will, but it won't be as easy if you do that directly. You will have to find a common link. So you have to find something that's interdisciplinary in between, which is where maybe your 1 year of work will come. So find something that supports you for a year at least, which will be common between what you want to do in your PhD and your master's. Spend a year in that thing, and then you'll be easy to then it'll be easy to hop.
When should we start mailing the professors, and is it the only way to get PhD in US?
No, it's not. For sure, it's not. Most of the students don't get admissions using PhD, using emails only. They get it from online portals, sending your applications formally through portals. The best time to apply to send for a professor depends on when their university hires for PhD. If, for example, in University of Michigan, they accept applications all throughout the year. So in that case, you can send an email to professor anytime you want. If the professor you're looking for has good research funding, then again send it anytime you want. But if it's a fall specific or a spring specific group, then do that according to the timeline of your applications.
Okay, what's your vision for the future of JK scientists, and how do you plan to expand its impact on the scientific community?
The one easiest and most helpful way is to literally spread out the word as much as you can. So even and be available. Be available on social platforms, which is what I intend to do personally. Be available for because LinkedIn, Facebook is not that very helpful for me personally. LinkedIn has been tremendously helpful, and staying in touch with my old professors, where I recently got reconnected with some professors from NIT. I think that is an easy way to help someone in the place where you were in.
Can you have some final comments on how students back home can benefit from JK scientists through different programs or through different mentorship programs and outreach sessions? Any final comments on that?
All the people in JK scientists are all researchers spread everywhere in the world. So even if you're just in contact with them, just learning about, like today we had this session, learning from individuals about how they got into it, of course, is sort of a way for you to think about. I think all the platforms that JK scientists is using are will prove to be very effective, given that there are almost all the social platforms where students can reach you out. Um, it if you can connect to each of them, I think mentorship would be one-on-one mentorship if that's available, depending on the availability of the researcher. I think that would be a great thing where students can benefit from.
Great. Thanks so much for a wonderful session.
Not a
And I
problem.
think a lot of students got enough information.
I
Uh,
hope I was helpful enough.
it was great. And we just have some more upcoming sessions like this, where we will talk about different funding opportunities, admission opportunities in different universities, whether in Europe or US or anywhere else in the world. We have a tentative program on 1st Feb, where we will discuss about different opportunities for earth sciences, geography, environmental sciences, and related disciplines on 1st Feb, hopefully. And we'll talk about different opportunities, how to get admission, and different research opportunities, different career paths that we can have in different earth science disciplines as well. Okay, thank you for having a great session. Over to you, Khalid bhai.
Yeah, thank you, Ishfaq and Zulkifl, for such a wonderful session. I hope our mentees and others who joined us today would have a lot of takeaways from this session. Personally, I will end this today's meeting with on a note that doing science and doing quality science and making a career in science is not an easy job. It's a long journey. So, for instance, somebody wants to do very, very good science, he has to do an undergrad, he has to do lots of internships, he has to do lots of projects, he has to do masters, he has to do a PhD program and maybe a lot of postdocs also, and then maybe go into being a great scientist or maybe a teaching guy like assistant professorships. But I mean, the problem with all of us collectively is that we want quick solutions, which is not true. Life, I mean, it doesn't have any shortcuts. So doesn't science have any shortcuts. So that's what we preach at JK Scientists, that we need to train ourselves as well, and we need to train our mentees also that we need time and we need things to build up that will be reflected in our CVs. For instance, as we talk daily on or related to internships and projects and publications, which makes you stand ahead of the crowd. So once again, thank you for doing this wonderful outreach program today. We'll have more sessions in the future. And it's really impossible to address all the questions in a single session when we are joining maybe for 1 hour or so. But I assure you all that we'll have more sessions in the future, not just specifically related to US. We'll move to West also, we'll move to East also, and maybe also have a few sessions with scientists based in India like we had in the past with people who are working in ISERs or IITs or even at NCBS and ISC. So that is a word from all of us together. Thank you so much once again. So I think we will just wind up the session. Thanks, Zulkifl. Thank you, Ishfaq. And thank you, everybody who joined us today.
Thanks.